Russian Defense Minister Andrei BELOUSOV has become a real nightmare for NATO in 7 months. His reform of the army turned everything from the production of weapons to the use of drones upside down. And if you think that's all, then you're very wrong. The West has not seen this yet. Russia is not just catching up. It is ahead. Do you want to know how BELOUSOV created an army that even the United States cannot handle? Watch it now. Russian Defense Minister Andrei BELOUSOV has been in office for just under a year, but despite his relatively short term, he has already done a lot of work. This fact was noted in a recent interview by military expert and analyst Scott Ritter, who stressed that BELOUSOV's activities proved to be incredibly effective. The effectiveness of BELOUSOV's work is so obvious that even NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who, as you know, rarely gives positive assessments to the Russian army, was forced to admit its significant strengthening over the past 6 months. In fact, in just 7 months, BELOUSOV managed to make major changes that affected not only the size of the Russian army, but also the quality of its weapons, logistics, and morale. These changes were noted not only by the Russian military, but also by foreign experts, who point to a rapid increase in the pace of arms production in Russia. These figures have increased to unprecedented proportions, which is a direct confirmation of the high efficiency of the Ministry of Defense under BELOUSOV's leadership. The recent statement by the NATO Secretary General was another proof of this effectiveness. He expressed concern that Russia produces as many artillery shells in just 1 month as all NATO countries produce during the year. Moreover, this rate of production is not only not decreasing, but, on the contrary, continues to grow rapidly. Obviously, such results are not an accident, but are the result of a well-organized and well-coordinated work organized by BELOUSOV. The Minister of Defense did not just restore the country's defense industry, but brought it to a new level of development, making it one of the most powerful in the world. Eric Prince, director of the largest American private military company, also commented on this issue, saying that the Russian army has significantly changed over the past year. In his opinion, it has become much more deadly and dangerous, which creates serious challenges for Western armies. Prince also noted that in its current form, the Russian armed forces represent a force that even the armies of the United States and Europe are unlikely to be able to cope with in the event of a direct military clash. However, that's not all. According to Russian media reports, BELOUSOV managed to create significant strategic reserves, which amount to about 500,000 people. These forces are planned to be involved in offensive operations as part of the spring-summer campaign, which may become another important stage in the process of transforming the Russian army and preparing it for future challenges. In this regard, the question arises, how long will Western countries be able to ignore such obvious changes? After all, every day Russia's military potential continues to strengthen, and its armed forces are becoming more trained and equipped. As for the NATO countries, it becomes obvious that they cannot yet offer an effective response to such a rapid strengthening of the Russian army. Brussels continues to talk about sanctions and new restrictions, but it is becoming increasingly clear that these measures are not capable of slowing down the development of the Russian military machine. Despite all the efforts of the West, the Russian economy has not weakened, but, on the contrary, continues to function stably. This provides reliable support for the defense industry and gives Russia the opportunity to increase the production of weapons in even greater volumes. American analyst and military expert Scott Ritter recently spoke about BELOUSOV's activities, emphasizing its exceptional effectiveness. When I heard that Putin had appointed BELOUSOV Minister of Defense, I immediately realized that this caused real horror in the Pentagon and NATO. Not because this person poses some kind of threat on his own, but because he is extremely effective. And let's be honest, NATO and the Pentagon don't like such people. They prefer those who simply sign papers and act within the framework of the usual schemes. And BELOUSOV is a man who does everything differently. This is not just a new approach, it is a real revolution in the Russian army. And you know what? It makes the West terribly nervous. I'll tell you straight out, BELOUSOV, as soon as he took up the post of defense minister, began to carry out such reforms that everyone in NATO literally had their blood boiling. He didn't just make small changes, he completely reformatted the leadership of the Ministry of Defense, replacing the old team with those who really strive for victory. He got rid of people stuck in the past and put those in key positions who look to the future and are not afraid to act. The personnel changes in the ministry are not just an indicative update. This is a carefully considered strategic move. BELOUSOV holds his post because he is able not only to adapt to new realities, but also to find non-standard solutions. Now that new generation professionals are in key positions, BELOUSOV's army reform has begun to bear real fruit. He didn't just cut the bureaucracy in half as promised, he actually got rid of everything superfluous. To be honest, I myself thought that bureaucracy in the army was an unavoidable evil, but BELOUSOV proved that you can act quickly and efficiently without drowning in paperwork. Less paperwork means more real action, more efficiency. And if you ask me what that means, I'll tell you. This is not just an improvement in the system, it is a real strategic breakthrough. But even this is not the limit of BELOUSOV's capabilities. He didn't just talk about the importance of drones, he actually built an army on drones. Currently, the Russian armed forces use about 4,000 drones every day. These are not just numbers for reports, this is a real advantage on the battlefield, which is confirmed by the facts. And the most interesting thing is that NATO has not yet been able to find an adequate response to this challenge. Even if Western countries want to catch up with Russia in the field of drone warfare, they will still find themselves in the position of catching up. Thus, BELOUSOV not only changed the approach to the organization of the army, but also created the conditions for its confident technological superiority. These changes continue to evolve, and every day it becomes more and more obvious that the Russian army is reaching a new level of combat capability that the West will have to reckon with. The West is indeed developing its own drones, but their level of development is still significantly lagging behind Russian technologies. Meanwhile, BELOUSOV took up this issue in earnest. He is not just developing the production of drones, but is introducing new technologies, creating unmanned vehicles that operate on fiber-optic communication lines. Such drones turn out to be invulnerable to electronic warfare systems, which gives the Russian army a serious advantage. At the moment, Western countries have nothing that could compare with similar technologies, even approximately. Now imagine how it works directly on the battlefield. While NATO countries are only studying the theoretical aspects of using drones, Russia has already created a full-fledged drone army. Russian unmanned aerial vehicles are capable of intercepting signals, performing tasks with high accuracy and doing everything necessary in combat. While the West is thinking about how to deal with drones, the Russian army is already actively using them, launching strikes in real time. If the NATO countries have not yet realized how dangerous this is, then they will soon have to face this threat in practice. But BELOUSOV did not stop there. He is not just developing new models of drones, but completely changing the approach to combat operations. One of the key decisions was to rethink the structure of ammunition and weapons storage. Previously, the main focus was on large military bases, but this approach had a serious drawback. When attacking such facilities, the army lost its combat capability on a significant scale. BELOUSOV proposed a fundamentally different method. He creates a network of small but well-protected and mobile databases. This approach completely changes the logic of warfare, allowing the Russian army not only to effectively survive in modern conflict, but also to achieve strategic victories. Unlike Western countries, which are still only analyzing the new principles of military operations, Russia is already putting them into practice. This ability to quickly adapt to new challenges and stay one step ahead scares the West. However, it doesn't end there. BELOUSOV managed to rebuild the command system so that the army acts quickly, competently, and with minimal losses. We can already see how Russian troops are steadily advancing, especially in the border areas, where the completion of the military operation is only a matter of time. There is every reason to believe that after this phase is completed, Russia will continue its offensive, reach the state border, and then begin creating a sanitary security zone, as required by Vladimir Putin. It is important to understand that these are not just tactical steps, but a major strategic goal that may eventually lead to the expansion of territories under Russian control. And BELOUSOV is behind all this, who is not just reforming the army, but making it more flexible, mobile, and ready for any scenarios. It is impossible not to mention the new weapons system. In particular, we are talking about the Orshnik missiles, which, in fact, have become a real threat to NATO countries. These missiles have not only high accuracy, but also the ability to overcome missile defense systems. Western countries will not be able to intercept them, which makes Orshnik a powerful instrument of strategic deterrence. BELOUSOV did not just dream of creating such missiles. He turned this project into reality. Their mass enlistment will begin this year. For NATO, this means one thing: their defensive systems will be powerless in the face of a new threat. The warheads of these missiles have such destructive power that they can be compared to nuclear weapons, but without radioactive contamination of the area. In this context, it becomes obvious that BELOUSOV's appointment to the post of defense minister was not an accidental decision. Against the background of recent events, his activities are becoming particularly important. In recent weeks, European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, have been increasingly discussing the Russian threat. This statement is not just political rhetoric, but there are very real plans behind it to build up Europe's military power. At a recent summit in Brussels, von der Leyen said the European Union needed to create comprehensive security guarantees. According to her, this includes not only strengthening the armed forces of European countries, but also significant rearmament of the state in conflict with Russia. She also mentioned the need to turn this country into a kind of steel porcupine, which, as she put it, would be impossible for a potential adversary to digest. To achieve this goal, Brussels plans to modernize the entire European army and rearm it on a large scale. The European Union intends to allocate a whopping €800 billion for this purpose. These funds will be used not only for the production of weapons, but also for financial and military assistance to the country opposing Russia. In addition, as part of the rearmament plan, it is proposed to attract additional credit resources in the amount of €150 billion. This money should be used to increase the production of weapons and create new military capacities. However, such initiatives will inevitably lead to serious economic consequences for Europe. The EU countries will be forced to significantly increase military spending, which will become an additional financial burden on their budgets. All these measures indicate that Europe is heading for a military confrontation, which makes the risk of a real armed conflict more likely. No less alarming was the recent statement by French President Emmanuel Macron. He not only supported the policy of strengthening European defense, but also stated that France is ready to use its nuclear arsenal to protect its EU allies. Macron noted that peace can no longer be guaranteed, and Russia, in his opinion, poses a threat to Europe. His words sound not just as a warning, but as an open threat, which the Kremlin took extremely seriously. Macron's speech provoked a sharp reaction in Moscow. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov called his words provocative and noted that such statements speak more about France's readiness for war than about the desire for peace. The Russian Foreign Ministry also drew attention to the words of the French leader, pointing out that there is clearly an element of nuclear blackmail in his rhetoric. Moscow sees this as an attempt by Paris to assume the role of a nuclear guarantor of the security of the whole of Europe. For Russia, such statements are not just a diplomatic threat, but a real signal that it is necessary to be prepared for a possible military clash with the European Union. Macron's position, which provoked a harsh reaction from Moscow, also raises the question of how Russia will build its defense strategy in an environment where European countries are clearly building up their military capabilities. Most likely, the Kremlin will respond by strengthening its armed forces and actively preparing to defend its national interests. Friends, now I want to express my opinion. It seems to me that the material really vividly reflects the phenomenal changes taking place in the Russian army under the leadership of Andrei BELOUSOV. These are not just reforms. They are a real revolution. He managed to rebuild the system from scratch, saving the army from the bureaucratic delays that so often waste time. The emergence of new technologies such as drones, as well as dramatic improvements in logistics and combat personnel, make the Russian army a powerful player on the global stage. BELOUSOV did not just upgrade the army. He created a military force that forces Western analysts to revise their forecasts. At the same time, I can't help but notice how this increase in military power is causing nervousness in the West. When BELOUSOV first came to the post of minister, everyone was waiting for standard steps, but he immediately began to act at the maximum, and this gives results. I am sure that it is precisely such reforms and an unconventional approach that can change the course of history. However, the question remains, How long will the West ignore such changes, and will they be able to offer an adequate response to such a rapid transformation of the army? Friends, be sure to write your opinion. I am very interested to know it. See you in the new videos.